Today, we're looking at a green ink by Levenger, Always Greener. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. Down below, there's timestamps so that if there's only certain things you're interested, you can skip around to it. But if you've got the time, I would appreciate you checking out the entire video. You can also follow me over on Instagram. And if you like fountain pen ink reviews and are new here, I would invite you to subscribe. In order to make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then put it into this Noodler's Naponset with a music nib. I wrote with it for a day and then used it to take the notes for this video. In order to have some standardization in my writing samples, I always use Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I picked this ink up in sample form, so it came in a vial like this. And to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X 450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X 750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at the Clairfontaine. We get no bleeding, no real ghosting. I actually see a little bit more of it myself than what's showing up on camera. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, spots of shading peppered in, darker spots. The extra fine is the same tone as the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, peppered shading throughout, 3 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the extra fine, with no feather spread, halo sheen, peppered shading throughout. More of it here than we got in the other two, with 3 seconds to dry still. The scrubby for both do show plenty of color variation, and we do get that in the peppering that's going on. Tomoe River. Bleeding. There's bleeding on Tomoe River paper, although it didn't touch the page underneath. This is an aggressive ink and a ton of show-through. Of course. The 1.1 is no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade. The extra fine is just a tad lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 6 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade, and 7 seconds to dry. Scrubby for both show no color variation, and we didn't get it. And Rhodia. Now we have no bleeding, but we do have ghosting going on. This is a light green that's ghosting with Tomoe River. Just look at that again. Amazing. It's because it's so aggressive getting into the paper. The 1.1 has feathering all over it. Lots of tiny little feathers. No spread, halo sheen, no shade. The extra fine is just slightly lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 4 seconds to dry. The medium is the same tone as the stub. It's got a bunch of tiny feathering on a lot of the words, not all of the words, but definitely on quick, definitely on the, and on lazy, and on dog. Whew. No spread, halo, sheen, no shade, 4 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both do show tiny bits of color variation left to right, although it's not showing up in the writing. I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And initially, you might think this is a yellow and blue makes green scenario. What's really going on is we have a yellow dye, green dye, and blue dye, and you do see them very distinctly in this, and you do see that some of the green is just beginning to show some of its hold on in that line across the bottom. Now the one on the right I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. And the thing that makes me say this is definitely 3 different dyes is that blue is still very much at the top. The yellow is pushed its way up, and so has some of the green, but it's been slowing as it goes. But look at the line on the bottom. The line on the bottom is still some of that yellow. You see it as a taller part of the line, but the bottom part of it is the green, which really bonded with the filter paper quite quickly. Resistance tests are done to see how well this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it might be to clean from your pen. I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, I feel perfectly fine using this in a note-taking situation, except for all the bleeding that this tends to have. Water is reactivating and lifting some, but not very much ink here. pen flesh is certainly doing a whole lot more than the water's doing, but look at how that yellow is really bonded into the paper and it is not budging at all. I did have to use pen flesh to get this out of my pen. Water was not enough. I didn't have to get to the bleach. Bleach is completely removing it from the paper. I just don't think you're going to need that to get it out of your pen. I test ink viscosity or flow by using a tilt test, and I'll link that somewhere here. And for the inks I've tested, I have found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Put the data onto a bell curve or standard deviation for it to be easily understood. Levenger's Always Greener has a viscosity of 1.89, making this a wetter ink. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples. Now for the inks I've tested, I found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Levenger's Always Greener has an average dry time of 5 seconds, making this very fast. Instead of finding inks that look like Levenger's Always Greener, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. I wanted to go with a nice brown, and I chose Noodler's Beaver. The second writing sample is done on yellow Rhodia, white lines, and Strathmore writing paper. Here we're looking at the yellow Rhodia paper, not to see how it's going to perform on here, but more to see if we go through any kind of tone change that goes on, with there being so much yellow in this particular ink in its chromatography. And what we see is there's no change at all. Maybe it's a tad bit lighter on the extra fine, but that's about it. This is an incredibly strong, opaque ink. This is white lines paper. Now we get a ton of bleeding. It does not touch the page underneath. We get a ton of show through as a result. The 1.1 has feathering all over it. It has no spread, halo, sheen, no shade. The extra fine has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, no shade. 1 second to dry. It's a little bit lighter than the stub. Same tone as the extra fine is the medium, which has a ton of feathering, tiny feathering all over it, really small feathering. It wouldn't stop you from being able, it's not so distracting that it would bother you reading. No spread, halo, sheen, no shade, 1 second to dry still. The scrubby for both don't really, well, the medium shows a little bit of color variation. The extra fine shows none, but we got none in the writing. Last up is Strathmore writing paper. And we do get some bleed. Doesn't touch the page underneath. We do get some ghosting. I don't think you could use the back of the page from how it looks from the bleed spots. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade. The extra fine is a bit lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 1 second to dry. Medium is the same tone as the extra fine with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 1 second to dry. The scrubby for both does show some color variation left to right, although it's not showing up in the writing, and that is all that I have for the writing sample. So what do I think of Levenger's Always Greener? This is a very aggressive ink. So aggressive that it pushes its way through almost every paper that I put it onto. It makes it the first ink that I ever just sort of abandoned and dumped the bottle. I can't see using it because of just how aggressive it is. There's no chance to use the back of the page, and sometimes there's a chance of touching the back of, or the front of the next page. It made it not something I wanted to use. What nib and pen would give the best writing experience? Because of how aggressive it is, the only thing I can see using is a very dry fine or extra fine to try and tame this ink some. I put out a new ink review every single day, so that if you're not already subscribed, I'm going to remind you, go ahead and subscribe. Thanks for watching.